Hey guys, and welcome back to Feelin' Feline, a podcast where we talk about what it's like being in our 20s and the 20s. For today's episode, we're going to talk about friends and how we shouldn't be letting their problems be our main problems, and how to still be a good friend without sacrificing ourselves. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this, so let's just get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Happy mid-April. I can't believe, I feel like I just blinked and all of a sudden it's mid-April. I feel like April always goes by pretty fast, but this week has been insane and already just recovering from my COVID shot. I was just going through a lot of things. I felt super tired and I'm just finding the motivation to work out. It's Thursday. So I just worked out for the second day this week, and normally I'd be on like day 4 already, but it's been rough and I think it's just good to take a break. I feel like I needed a break, but I don't know. I feel like this time of year is kind of hard because I feel like this is kind of where most people fall out of their New Year's resolution goals, all of their just usual habits. I don't know why that is, but I just feel like by the time April comes around, people kind of start to get not lazy. I want to say comfortable, and they fall out of their general habits and things. So yeah, I think if you are listening, this is the message to keep going, keep pushing. We are a third down for the year, and already it didn't feel like that. Isn't that crazy? We're already like almost a third into the year, and 2021, how do I wrap it up? I mean, honestly, I can at least say it's a little bit better than 2020, but there's a lot going on in just the world. Asian violence. There's, Dante Wright, that, shooting situation where he was supposed to be tased and then got shot. And it's sad on both ends. And unfortunately, the cop, no matter whether it was accidental or not, she's going to have to pay for the consequences. And yeah, I mean, it's sad. She's been with the force for 25 years, and just already the race that's behind this situation, it's already just a messed up situation. It's sad, and I don't know, it's really messed up. That's all I can say on that. And it's unfortunate, but whether or not, you know what I mean, you have to pay for the consequences, and that's pretty much what's going to happen at this point. So yeah, that's about current events really that at least I'm really focused on. And isn't it crazy that this J&J vaccine is kind of on hold? I mean, this is kind of what everyone was scared about. And I feel like people who are like anti-vaccine are like, told you so, see, there's something wrong, blah, blah, blah. But that's the thing with vaccines. And I think J&J, in a way, they're right for holding the vaccine back and kind of stopping and pausing distribution. But you have to remember that the statistics for blood clots are actually less than what something birth control would give. And a lot of people in this country take birth control. So it's something to consider. And of course, there shouldn't even be a percentage about blood clots in general. But if you compare it to what birth control does and that percentage of risk of blood clots, it's actually a lot less. And whatever, your preference of vaccine or not, I think it was right for J&J to at least take it back, put it on pause, and kind of research what's going on to at least prevent further percentages of these like blood clots. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on that thing. And Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's going to be another episode. Probably by the time that this episode comes out, the new episode will be coming. And according to Twitter and all social media, there's going to be somebody super important that's going to come into the show. So I'm really excited about that. I'm honestly just super impressed with Marvel just putting these kind of Easter eggs and like little characters and tying them together. I think it's so cool. I'm really excited to see how that goes. And I know I've been saying this for probably 3 or 4 episodes, but you guys need to get on Handmaid's Tale. If you're into the whole, dystopian society type thing, it is such a good show. It definitely messes with you, and it's pretty dark, to be honest. And honestly, I was not expecting it to get this dark, and I feel like it's just going to get worse, but you guys should definitely get on it. And if you have started, I'd love to talk to somebody about this, because I feel like not many people around me watch it. I want to talk to someone about it because it's so cool and I love the concept. And honestly, in a country like this, I feel like we would never go to that extreme, but it's kind of a realistic future. But again, I don't expect it to follow the same as the show, of course, but dystopian societies were always something that is kind of a common theme in at least history and in books and everything. And I feel like people have tried to put upon these policies or rules or regulations that they think will be helpful for the country, but really there's this low-key rebellion. And I love stories like that, even smaller ones like Hunger Games or like Fahrenheit 451. So that book I read actually when I was in middle school. And I think if, I reread it again, I feel like I should, because I'm sure now, years later, looking back at it, there's probably more that I didn't even pay attention to. And first of all, when I read it in middle school or high school, whenever it was, I really didn't care about English class and stuff. But I don't know. I feel like it's cool. And my sister, I was just on the phone with her yesterday, and I think it's so funny because she mentioned that you used to read a lot. And I was like, you're so right. And I'm kind of trying to get in touch with reading again. It's been really hard, but I try to make the time at least sometimes, maybe once a week, to at least read a little bit more, because reading does help you in terms of your knowledge, and you get to learn these vocab words and just gives you a chance to open up your imagination. And I think that's so cool. It's kind of an escape from the stress that life already brings these days. So yeah, I feel like I totally rant in the beginning because there's just so much I have to talk about, and I just feel like everything's super important to talk about. But for this episode, I'm going to be talking about friendship and just not letting it weigh you down, and not letting friendships and problems with your friends and the people around you affect your mental health. And I think these are important conversations because in our 20s, I feel like we're still not in touch with how we feel at the moment and how we handle our emotions. And on top of that, how we handle other people's emotions. So I think a lot of times what everyone feels around us, it kind of affects us, We make it our problem, basically. And although there is a higher emphasis on people with mental health relying on other people, it honestly could be somebody who's not really struggling with mental health, but using you to kind of help them feel better, using you as an outlet. And oftentimes people confuse that as feeling a distinct responsibility to help somebody feel better. And there's a set boundary that you kind of have to give yourself in your friendships and, around everybody, that you have to kind of set yourself back when you feel like you're doing too much, especially because you yourself, you have a lot of things going on, and you can't forget to take care about yourself when you're too busy taking care of everybody else. And call it what you want. It could sound like I'm saying be a little more selfish, and technically I am, but at the same time, I'm trying to emphasize finding that perfect balance between somebody who's always using you to help them feel better all the time, to the point where whenever they're going through something, they're going to rely on you to always make them feel better. And that's different, because it's different when friends are going to you just to rant, and when they're struggling with something and just need to rant about something. But it's a whole nother thing when they're constantly trying to rely on you, and God forbid you mess it up, they're going to be disappointed in you or sad or even more frustrated with the whole situation that they're struggling with because you weren't able to help them get out of it. And that right in itself is something that we need to practice in our 20s, to at least be able to find that limit that you can stop drowning yourself in other people's problems and start focusing on your own things. Now, I feel like I always had that characteristic about me where I constantly made other people's problems my own. And whenever someone was going through something, I would almost make myself go through what they're feeling and kind of let it affect how I'm feeling at the moment, how I'm handling situations and this and that. And sometimes it gets really exhausting because you forget that you're your own person, your own separate entity, your own separate lifestyle. You have your own things going on. And it comes to the point where sometimes you feel like the friendship is one-sided. And that's happened to me quite often, where I constantly feel like somebody was always just trying to rant to me. But then, when it comes down to switching sides, or if I needed somebody to talk to, it was a little bit harder and a little bit more difficult to get my feelings across, or at least feel comfortable and feel the same way that, I would make them feel if they were struggling with something. And don't get me wrong, I know everybody's different and everyone handles situations different. So, when I'm ranting to somebody, I'm not going to expect them to react the same way that I would. But sometimes there are people out there who definitely make the situation more uncomfortable than it truly should be. And don't get me wrong, I've definitely been on both sides of that coin where I felt like I was relying on somebody way too much for emotional support. And without that person and without constantly spending time with them, I felt totally different. I felt sad. I felt like I couldn't handle my own problems. But that's already in itself a major problem, because life is fun and all, and you get to spend a lot of quality time with a lot of people around you. But at the end of the day, you yourself are going to be the one that's going to handle your problems, and you yourself will have to face your own emotions, whatever you're struggling with. And yes, people are going to be around you, but the only thing that they can really provide for you is support. And end of the day, you're going to have to deal with that. So I wanted to start with ways to identify if somebody is being really excessive around you. And I feel like sometimes we don't realize it because it's been something so automatic in our life. For example, somebody who's excessively wanting your attention, or somebody who's always just messaging you for the sake of ranting or letting out their feelings. And then other than that, it's not really anything else. And that's also a big sign too. People sometimes think, oh, we're friends, but really, you only talk to each other when one of us has issues. So that's something to consider too, at least. Another major kind of indicator that you're stuck in that kind of friendship is always feeling like you're walking on glass or feeling pressure. And it can be anything that you feel pressure from, but it's most likely the cases where you really don't want to mess up around that person. And that's already kind of toxic in a way, but you don't realize it half the time that you're always so worried about how the other person is going to react if you do something that they're not necessarily supporting or they don't like. And, they get very angry or repulsed or just act differently, and it's a lot of pressure for you. So you have to keep feeling like you have to get their acceptance before you do anything. And also sometimes what a lot of people don't really understand is that limit. When are you helping somebody too much? And that's a very general, large question. There's not a direct answer to it, but there is a point where you are helping somebody too much and honestly enabling them. Sometimes it is partially the friend's responsibility for enabling that other person to always be somebody that they can rely on, and just dropping everything whenever they reach out, dropping everything whenever they need a friend, or even just stopping your normal routine just to help your friend out. And sometimes it's not the right direction to go, especially in cases where, your friend is starting to rely on you way too much. And it could start as general conversations about what's bothering you. Next thing you know, it's happening every day. And next thing you know, they're telling you, what would I do without you? You're saving me from myself. You're really helping me stay me. And I think I've said that a few times for sure. And I think the best responses I get sometimes are, this was one, at least back in the day when I was doing it very so often, I would get a response that says something like, it's not me who's making you me. You should be doing this for yourself. You should be doing this because you want to, not because I think it's the best idea. And those responses are actually a great idea when it comes to dealing with somebody who's relying on you too much and sacrificing your own mental health to help them out. That's a very good response in ways to help them not be enabled to always rely on you. And what's crazy is usually they don't always start out that way. They don't start out as friendships that it's all you giving and nobody is really giving an equal balance of giving and taking. It's more you helping them out, and then, they don't really help out too much. And then all of a sudden the friendship is draining. You're exhausted because all you're doing is everything that the other person wants to do, wants to talk about, and it gets really exhausting. And honestly, at one point, they begin to start using you as treatment for their emotional problems. And that's where you end up having to sacrifice things that you want to do, things that you want to feel, and problems that you want to deal with on your own too. Because listen, everybody has their own problems in life. And I feel like sometimes in these types of friendships, the other person doesn't really understand that. For example, if you are the person who's being relied on by your friend doesn't realize that you also have a lot of things going on, and it won't really be shown to them. Their eyes won't be open to the situation unless you yourself says something about it. And there's a quote that kind of stays with me over the past few years. I don't remember when I saw it, but it was something like, the higher that people hold you up, the deeper the fall. And that is so very much true, especially when it comes to friendships that are heavily relying on you. If you are constantly being or acting like the solution, not more as a support for your friends, one day you're going to mess up so bad. And because, even though it was a little thing, because they always expected you to fix your problems and to fix their problems and really just be the solution to all of their problems, it'll come crashing down on you. And it shouldn't be like that. You shouldn't be taking the full responsibility of their own issues crashing down and you unable to fix it. And it's almost like a tough love situation where you kind of have to sometimes let the other person figure it out. And scientifically, that's important to do because you don't want to solve their problems and kind of stop them from something that could majorly affect their development. It could have been something so small, but actually something so beneficial for their personal development that unfortunately, because you were the one who solved their problems, you won't be able to be there all the time. And that person won't be able to handle situations like that because you were the one who fixed it for them. So it's kind of like you have to think about, this is something that you yourself should figure out. It's kind of giving them the opportunity to figure it out. And I feel like sometimes when people get that response, they are worried about the fact that, oh, that means that this person doesn't like me at all. They don't want to be there for me. But honest truth is, you're still going to support them. It's different from you doing everything. They have to learn and figure things out on their own too. The greatest example that I can really think of is actually in the workforce. When I had my previous job, there was somebody who I used to work with who did absolutely everything. So they were incredibly helpful, and I'm truly grateful for that. But I really can do these certain tasks alone or by myself. I didn't really ask for help at the time. But however, because they were always so persistent and, always trying to do things their own way, that was a problem because they were always being so helpful to the point that, the whole team honestly felt a little bit reliant on that person. And next thing you know, that person's starting to get stressed, starting to get frustrated because there were things that not everybody was following, and there were things that were done that they didn't really like process wise, and it was just a lot of pressure on that person, and eventually it caused some tension in the team. So again, that's another example of sometimes being helpful is not helpful because it's too much help. You got to sometimes give the person the opportunity to do things on their own, learn things their own way, because that is the only way that people will grow and develop and practice just life skills in general and how to handle different situations. And again, if you're feeling guilt or feeling pressured to have to help somebody, to have to drop everything for the other person, that already is a sign in itself that your friend is relying on you way too much. It's sometimes hard because, you don't want to hurt their feelings. And most of the time, these are people that are really close to you, really special to you. Of course, you don't want to hurt their feelings. And of course, you just want to drop everything. But sometimes it's sacrificing your own personal time, your own personal feelings, and end of the day, you're going to be affected and you're going to be stressed out for them, and you're not going to be able to focus on your own personal development. You're taking all of these skills and helping somebody else fix their problems, and it's honestly just hurting the both of you because you won't be able to focus on yourself, and the other person won't really get a chance to grow and learn and figure out things on their own as well. And a lot of people listening probably are like, Feline, that's kind of tough. That's kind of a little aggressive, a little mean to be ignoring somebody, especially when they need to talk to you. But when it comes down to it, it's kind of like a tough love situation where you kind of have to be tough for your friend for them to learn and figure it out themselves. Because, okay, a good example is this, if somebody's messaging you, your friend, and she wants to know, okay, do you think I should stay here in New Jersey and kind of keep my job, or should I move to Texas and start this whole new job that's in a whole new place with nobody I know? And already right there, that's a life-changing decision. They're relying on you to make this decision. Do you know how much pressure that is? If somebody ever asked me that question, I don't know how the hell I would answer. I mean, old Feline would be like, what? No, why are you leaving? Come stay with me. We're best friends. You can't leave me, blah, 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 blah. But now I'm going to say, listen, you got to do what's best for you. Moving to Texas has its pros and cons. Moving and just starting in a new place and having to meet new people, having to pay for things, and just starting a whole new life in a new place, it has its pros and cons. And then also staying here also has its pros and cons, but I'm not going to be the one to make that executive decision for you, because God forbid I tell you to move to Texas and it's the most horrible thing and all these bad things happen to you, or God forbid I tell you to stay and you miss out on an amazing opportunity to meet new people and grow in your career. I mean, I can't even make my own decisions for myself, let alone decisions for somebody else. So that's why it's hard, because if somebody's always relying on you in terms of making themselves feel better and making decisions, it's honestly just going to end up getting all screwed up when you make the wrong choice for them and all of a sudden, they're resenting you, they hate you, or your friendship kind of just fades away. And also, side topic, it's crazy. Not many people think of codependency or dependent relationships in friendships. You see it a lot in serious relationships or maybe family relationships, but I feel like not many people talk about best friends or close friends and how sometimes dependency can get a little wishy-washy in terms of what you're looking in the friendship and what they're looking for in the friendship, and just arguments in between that lead to some sort of reliance that needs to be cut at the nip of the bud. Sometimes there needs to be a limit set in terms of what one person can decide on versus what their friend can decide on. And honestly, I struggled with that a lot when I was younger. I was always a people pleaser. And yes, not every clingy relationship or dependent relationship or friendship is kind of centered on somebody who is a people pleaser. But I feel like people who want to always make other people happy are always the ones that are most involved in relationships or friendships where they have to sacrifice their own feelings, their own time, and center their focus around everyone else. It's very difficult, especially because most of the time you're not aware that it's actually happening. And kind of because of that, you kind of think that you're this perfect person and you don't mess up and you shouldn't mess up. And when you do mess up, you really beat yourself down and it's mentally draining, honestly. So I think the first step in at least trying to set these boundaries with your friends around you is letting them know that you're not perfect. I think that's a very big sentence to say to your friends, especially because of the ones who are always relying on you to solve their problems. And on top of that, telling them that you're not perfect, you also have to kind of set limits or boundaries in how much you talk to them, honestly. If you physically are not available to talk to them or listen to their problems, you got to be straight up. You got to say, listen, I'm really in the middle of something with my family. I'm in the middle of dealing with something right now too. I definitely want to be there to support you, but is there any other time we can talk about this? Because sometimes they expect you to just drop everything, and that's kind of the first step in breaking that expectation. And again, it also ties with a people pleaser or a yes person. You're going to end up hurting yourself when all you do is say yes. You kind of have to figure out that moment of when you can say no and be comfortable with saying no. When I was younger, I had a lot of issues saying no. Whether or not I wanted to go somewhere, I'd just be chilling at my house and enjoying the day, and someone will message me saying, oh, do you want to hang out? And I'd feel bad saying no. So I would say yes and go out, and Yes, I'd have fun at the end of the day because whatever, but I wouldn't have to be spending so much. And a lot of that ties into senior year of college when I was going through a lot of stuff just mentally, physically, emotionally. And again, I was relying on people. So when I was sitting there by myself, I really was feeling anxious and stressed. And as soon as somebody asked me to hang out, I would immediately say yes. And that opened a lot of opportunities for people to constantly rely on me, not just for emotional issues, but just someone to hang out with. And when I finally realized that I shouldn't be spending money like this, or I shouldn't be finishing 2 bottles of Jack in a weekend, people started to get all weird with me sometimes. They'd be like, why aren't you coming out? Blah, blah, blah. And making me feel bad for choosing myself for once and choosing time to be inside and do things indoors. And it was very stressful too, because I almost felt bad not hanging out with them. So again, that's one of those relationships and friendships where I enabled people to always rely on me for things. So again, it's not just one person's fault for having this type of friendship. It's somebody who enables that behavior and somebody who takes advantage of that relationship. And I think it's so crazy talking about the past because it really took other people to be their own person, be independent from my relationships with them, for me to realize that I was also doing the same thing towards other people. So I think that's really how I realized, but you don't have to have someone do that to you for you to realize that someone is being too dependent on you. The signs are honestly right there. Sometimes you tend to just not pay attention to it, or you don't want to cause any problems with your friend, which again ties into the people pleaser characteristics. But you got to be real with yourself because especially in our 20s, there's a lot of things that we need to do, we need to accomplish, a lot of things we want to figure out in our lives, whether it's what we love to do, whether it's our job, our career development, personal development, who we want in our lives, and just who we want to spend forever with romantically, or just everything. We're figuring out ourselves. This is a huge decade of change and big decisions that if oftentimes you're not focused on that, you'll miss out on opportunities and chances and people that honestly could have a major impact in your life. So that's why I say sometimes you got to be straight up with your friends or people around you. Like, listen, I'm sorry I'm hung up with such and such. Actually, I don't feel like going. Is that okay? I want to kind of have a me day and watch TV. My friend Druvy, I need to tell this story because it's pretty funny. Sometimes I would ask her to hang out or go out. Every weekend from Thursday to Saturday, I'd be going out. And I'd always ask her to come. And sometimes she'll flat out just be like, nah, I don't feel like it because I want to watch my shows. And I'd actually legit get annoyed with her or mad at her because, we're roommates, we're best friends, we're supposed to be hanging out all the time. But again, that just ties back into the fact that I didn't want to deal with what I was dealing with physically, emotionally, mentally, everything. So I was constantly just always looking for people to hang out with because I didn't want to be by myself and be in my thoughts. I feel like if you've experienced that before, it's actually a lot easier for you to distance yourself from other people, especially because now you kind of know and understand that sometimes you need a day to yourself, and that's totally understandable. So if your friends or people around you are not happy with that, that's also a red flag right there that, maybe they are depending on you too much. And it could be a sign too that needs to happen more often. You can't always be a yes person. And I laugh about it because I was always a yes person and all of a sudden something just clicked in me. You can't just be saying yes to everybody. If you personally just don't want to do something, no is right there. It's very hard to say no to people important to you, but the true friends will rightfully respect you and understand that you yourself are also going through a lot of shit in your 20s, and they're not the only person who's going through a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm sure everybody around me has their own issues mentally, physically, emotionally. So rightfully so, if I reach out, if I call my friends and they don't answer, I will not get mad at them. Had it been old Feline a few years ago, a long few years ago, I'd be pissed at them for not answering, or, I would say something silly. 99% of the time it was a joke, but I'd say, goes on Twitter but doesn't text me back. I used to say that a lot, but that was me just low-key trying to be funny, but also have dependency issues. So I've learned a lot in that sense. And I think a lot of it, again, comes down to my friends also ended up being super independent and trying to figure out their own lives. And they also opened my eyes to the fact that not everybody's always going to be there for you, but you kind of have to set those boundaries up yourself. If you constantly are enabling the other person to keep relying on you, it's not going to get any better. And sometimes the first step has to come from you. You have to sometimes realize that I'm not really helping this person. I'm actually hurting them by always being there for them constantly, 24/7, solving all their problems for them. So you kind of have to have that conversation, not just with yourself, but with the other person as well. Is there something that's constantly on your mind that you feel like you're always having to rely on me for? Is there something that, you're not wanting to confront and therefore you're just trying to talk to me more about it or just have company about it? So yeah, I'm going to take a quick break and we'll be right back to talk about friendships and not letting it bother your mental health. Honestly, I'm hungry, you guys. Do you ever just crave authentic Indian food? I know I do, especially being at home so much. If you live in the Plainsboro area in New Jersey, Jaya's Kitchen has the hookup. Jaya's Kitchen is completely made from scratch, specializing in Andhra cuisines. Like, no joke, I had the best shrimp masala and coconut rice I've ever had. It's just so delicious, and you can have it for any meal of the day. It's perfect for dinner or even a small family event. So if you want to have any inquiries on any orders, you can hit up Jaya's Kitchen on Instagram at JAYASKITCHN. Again, it's JAYASKITCHN. Go ahead, try it out and enjoy it. It won't disappoint, I promise. All right, you guys, and welcome back. So we're going to dive right back into toxic relationships and just not letting it affect your mental health and just making yourself less available to those who are severely dependent on you. So a lot of what I can vouch for that at least I have learned in terms of me also being a dependent person is just being straight about my feelings. And I was not originally good at that. I was always trying to figure out what I would have to say to impress the other person, to make them happy. And again, that just leads to these fake layers of your friendship. You want your friendship to be as open and as transparent as possible. I think transparency was such a big word in the workforce when everybody was talking about being transparent. And I always used to just shrug it off, but I truly think transparency is such an important thing in every relationship. And still, I vouch about that. If somebody is constantly calling you after work and literally after work, you don't want to talk to anybody, you just want to eat dinner and enjoy the evening to yourself because the next day is another work day that you have to dealing with other people and communicating with other people, that's totally fine. But how is the other person supposed to know that you don't like when they call you after work? You got to be straight up about it. Like, listen, I'm tired after work, so I really do like talking to you and I appreciate our calls, but is there any way you could call me on Saturdays, for example? That's just one thing about being honest. And then another thing is just, every time they're emotionally drained or emotionally tired, you kind of have to be like, listen, I definitely want to support you, but I know that this is something that you have to handle on your own. If you were straight up about that and tell them that, hey, this is something that you honestly have to figure out on your own. And even if you were just straight up like, I don't want to be the person that ends up fixing all your problems. There's nothing wrong with that. I think transparency is something that we should practice in our 20s, especially in terms of how we're going to talk to our significant others or our kids in the future. You don't want to be kind of making up lies or falsifying the truth or hiding your feelings, because that kind of trait will be passed on to future generations. And I think being honest is very difficult sometimes, and being transparent, it's very hard. It's honestly something that as a people pleaser, you don't want to do half the time because the truth hurts. The honest truth hurts sometimes. Like, you don't want to be hearing the fact that, what you're worrying about is not really anything that serious, even though it really isn't that serious. Sometimes it takes somebody who gives you tough love like that and is super transparent and honest about the fact that, what you're bugging out about really isn't that bad. But sometimes it'll irk you like, "Ugh, I don't want to hear that right now. I want to hear that it is a bad thing and I want you to side with me." But that is how you can differentiate yourself from your friendship and bring it up to your friend that you are not perfect. You are not going to be everything they wanted and more. You're going to have different opinions, different values, different decisions. And I think that's important in a friendship. So again, it's not being afraid to be different, not being afraid to sometimes disagree with the person that you're dealing with who's dependent on you. That's something that really will open their eyes to the fact that, wow, this person is not perfect. They're not the solution to all my problems. And that's totally okay. But again, they won't realize it until you kind of break that normal routine of, if they're struggling with something, they rely on you to fix their problems or to numb them from their problems. Because honestly, it's like hiding all the dust under the rug. It's still there and it's going to pile up until you step on it and all the dust comes out and explodes and blah, blah, blah. Again, it's very easy to tell people what they want to hear for the sake of not arguing, for the sake of making them happy, for the sake of them just continuing to be happy. But sometimes you got to be real with that person. And I really respect my friendships that are super real with me whenever I need it. Sometimes when I'm bugging out about something, I call my best friends and literally they'll be like, "Listen, I hear where you're coming from, but you're kind of overreacting," which I don't want to hear, of course. I don't want to hear that I'm overreacting. Actually, it kind of annoys me sometimes, especially when people are like, "Calm down. It's not that serious." Oh my God, I lose my shit every time. But I know that it's out of their love and out of their hearts that they're giving me this piece of advice and they're just being real with me. And I would be pissed if they lied to me and really it wasn't that serious and ended up escalating the whole situation. So I truly respect my transparent and real relationships like that. And honestly, a lot of what I've realized has been super helpful in minimizing someone's dependency on me is when somebody's talking to me about their issues, I kind of look for solutions that they have to do themselves. So a good example is, for example, somebody who's really stressed out, and I'm also super stressed out, mind you. And they reach out and they're like, "Listen, I'm really stressed about blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "Okay, well, things that you can do are this, why don't you do a hobby that you haven't done in a long time? Why don't you meet new people? Why don't you join a new club? And maybe during COVID, it's a little bit difficult, but why don't you branch out and really talk to new people? Maybe there's someone in your life or not someone in your life who's meeting specific characteristics or specific things that you want to accomplish in life. You're not going to figure that out unless you go and branch out. Or why don't you go to the park or read something new, something like that." And it's all different ideas that require themselves to do on their own without everyone else. And I think that also helps them because that'll help them really think about, what can I do to solve the problem? And I think that's so cool because before, I think I really would just try to hold the issues. I'd be like, "Okay, let me see what I can do for you." Or, "Hey, why don't we get drunk instead and not think about this?" That's very toxic answers. And that just, again, enabled them to not just rely on me emotionally, but also rely on reckless things and do things out of logical thinking and more of emotional reactions to things. So yeah, I think that's another way to tackle friendships that are super dependent on you. You can talk about solutions that require their own mind, their own thinking, their own behavior changes, not just what can I do? It's what can you do to help solve the problem? And it's very tricky to word it and be straightforward about the answers without being offensive. And sometimes you have to think about it too, that you don't want to be too harsh, but you kind of have to help them in a way that you're like, "Okay, you can do this, you can do that." And you'll be surprised how people react to those things. They'll be super grateful on the fact that you're helping them out, but also maybe the next time that same issue happens, they won't reach out because they'll know that, hey, this is happening again. I know what to do. And you'll be so proud of them. It's happened so many times, not just me with my friends, but my friends for me, where I feel like they'd be able to tell me what the right thing to do is. But end of the day, their answer is always, whatever makes you happy. And I'm like, oh no, I don't want that answer. I just want you to tell me what to do. But I know that it's something that I have to figure out on my own too. And also another kind of big thing in terms of dependent relationships and things is that sometimes when someone is ranting their problems out to you, you actually feel their emotions. And it's definitely okay to feel someone's emotions and stress, but not to the point where it's also making you stressed. So let's say you're super happy, you're having a great day, and all of a sudden your friend calls you and rants about their problems, and all of a sudden you just feel terrible. And again, this comes with the people pleaser and the nice person characteristics. You start to feel bad too because, one of your friends isn't having a good day, and maybe that means I shouldn't be having a good day. I mean, what's the point? Someone around me isn't happy, so why should I have a good day? No, those are things that you kind of have to detach yourself from doing, because if you want to have a healthy relationship with someone, you want to make sure that you are still happy about your own personal achievements, but also, you'll feel bad for them, but don't let it drain out your entire day. It's mentally draining. And again, you'll feel like you're giving more than receiving from the other person. So again, you have to change your monologue, how you're thinking about things, and understanding the difference between somebody who's escaping a situation versus detaching, right? Escaping a situation. Okay, it's an automatic reaction that is based on, let's say, something you've experienced before where you can't handle it. Instead of dealing with it, you escape it. And this is what the person is kind of doing with you. They're reaching out to you to escape from whatever problems they're having. They want to go out. They don't want to really think about right now, which is very toxic all in its own. I used to do that, like I said. But detaching is basically a neutral standpoint, right? So that's also important too in these types of friendships and relationships. Dhruvi, I definitely have to vouch for her because she is such a neutral voice in my head whenever I talk to her. And I strive to be that neutral. Sometimes you side with one thing more than the other just because of your personal feelings towards something. And it actually can sway the other person to not make decisions based on their head, actually, and make decisions based on what you're actually feeling. So then you're going to cause this person to basically not think on their own. So you kind of have to detach from the situation. Don't get emotionally heated because of your own personal feelings about something. So yeah, detachment is something super important when they're ranting to you or letting out their problems. You want to make sure that you're not emotionally attaching yourself to your friend's problems, basically. You got to be that neutral ear, that neutral voice in their head to help them make the decision, not make the decision for them. It's a very thin line between making the decision for them and helping them make the decision. But I think with more open conversations and more communications about it, it gets easier. So again, I stress the transparency, and I stress just being straightforward with people. Because again, self-care, self-attention, it's something that we don't really put a major focus on in our 20s because life is so busy and we feel inclined to always be there for everybody, but we can't forget that we have our own problems, our own things that we need to accomplish and figure out on our own too. So you got to put yourself first sometimes. And like I said, people sometimes take the word no as something negative. I feel like whenever you hear the word no, it's like this negative connotation, but really no, it's a strong word. People don't use it that often because they're just too afraid to hurt someone's feelings. And there's nothing wrong with telling someone no at the current moment. If you really just want to do something for yourself and just say no, just say no. It's a lot easier than it seems. And I definitely struggled with that. But once you say it once you say it twice, 3 times, it becomes easier to say. you got to put your foot down. And again, this life only happens once. We're only given the 20s once. And this again applies to something before our 20s, after our 20s, always. If somebody is too emotionally dependent on you, you will forget about yourself. And time is just fleeting, my friends. You don't want to forget about yourself. So, end of the day, that's really important. You want to set your boundaries, be clear, be transparent. And you'll just see that these emotionally dependent relationships won't be as existent anymore, because you'll find that perfect balance between the two, and really understand that people can depend on you, but you also have stuff to deal with as well. And I think, again, growing up and getting into our 20s and everybody's kind of doing adult things, I think that people start to realize that more. And in college and high school, it's a little bit more furry and wishy-washy in terms of people understanding that sometimes you just don't want to do something. But in time, that's all it takes. And to kind of wrap it all up, your true friends will really be the ones who shine in these situations. When everything's good, you can stand there and say you have a million friends. When everything's happy, when you're happy, when everyone's happy, you think you have all these friends. But when shit gets real, that's when your true friends come out, because they will respect and understand that you need your time as well to go through the shit that you're going through, or figure out your life decisions, and just that you're struggling with things, and they'll give you that time. They won't be so dependent on you and make it a negative experience when you tell them these things. So sometimes you got to look out for yourself. And again, I'm just starting to learn this. I haven't really done it yet since I've been in college. When I was in college, I did a lot of that, where I had to always think about everybody else. But you got to put yourself first sometimes. Put your foot down. Don't be afraid, because you will be the one that's in charge of your own life. And don't be afraid to tell your friends that this is something that you should be figuring out on your own. And again, the true friends will be like, you know what? You're right. Or you know what? I don't agree with that, but thank you at least for listening to me and hearing me out. And these are healthy relationships and conversations. But again, you have to have them. You have to give yourself the opportunity to do that, and be aware that, listen, this one person is being dependent on me. Let me do something different this time. Let me suggest something that they can do on their own, and watch what happens. People will surprise you. So yeah, I think that totally wraps up our conversations about just dependent friendships and how you can put yourself first sometimes. Totally not wrong, and you should embrace it. I feel like, again, self-love, self-attention, it needs more focus, especially in this decade, especially for our generation and future generations. We should definitely be more open and respectful of people wanting their own me time, self-love time, self-attention time. And that's my TED Talk for now. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, concerns, or DMs, or any topics, anything you want to talk about, even Handmaid's Tale, please, I need somebody to talk about with this show. Reach out to me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. My Instagram and TikTok are at Feeling Feline Podcast. My Twitter is at Feeling Feline. And thank you so much, you guys, for listening. And until next time, bye.